Greetings, Warzone kids. I'm here this morning with Kay Pranis. Going to add this to the interview collection on the channel, Trail to the Western Lands on TikTok and YouTube. So I came to know Kay Pranis as a as myself. I'm a volunteer circle keeper for Green Circles with Hidden Water Circle, which is an organization that facilitates healing circles by and for those affected by child sex abuse. That's the sentence that I've learned to say to describe what hidden water is. And I met Kay through Hidden Water, and she's a kind of world-renowned expert, to use that word early, in healing.
Uh,
I'll be provocative right from the start. Um,
yes.
uh, uh, she's a renowned figure in the world of healing circles, well known. In fact, she's written a book called the Little Book of Circle Processes, and others feel free to describe yourself. And I know that your Kay's professional career includes work with the Minnesota Department of Corrections around their restorative justice processes. Um, and I'm specifically talking to Kay this morning because I talked with Elizabeth Clements, founder of Hidden Water, a few months ago, and really enjoyed the conversation. And interested in talking with other folks related to, Hidden Water and healing. And Kay's name came up, and kind of as that process was unfolding, I heard from Taylor at Hidden Water that a topic that comes up sometimes for them as a 501, I assume they're 501c3 not-for-profit corporation. They have funders, they have a business plan, they have a board, they have a position in the world, they have considerations like that. And they get questions around, what's the evidence for this? Where are the experts? Where are the people with PhDs and MDs and MEds and all kinds of other letters after their name that tells us that this is a good idea? What are you doing exactly? This, something like that was a general topic that emerged. And I found I had a really strong reaction to that. So I made a few videos. I put them on a playlist on my channel. And I just kind of wanted to set that up both for Kay and the audience as just like a general topic to get us started off. This topic, experts in healing, letters after their names. I'll just hand you the microphone, Kay, and you can take it from there, finish introducing yourself. Tell me what you think about experts in healing and anything else that's on your mind at the moment. We'll take it from there.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ben. Um, so, yeah, I will push back on the term expert for myself to begin with. Um, I accidentally ended up in the position of being a pioneer in this work, but not because the ideas are new and not because I'm an expert. So it's important to know first that I have no formal training in any related field. I've never had a course in law. I've never had a course in criminal justice. I've never had a course in psychology. Um, so I came to the work that I do through a path of life that involved parenting and involved being a community activist. And then I accidentally ended up working in the criminal justice field because I couldn't get a job anywhere else when I was 40 years old. And in that field, learned about the concepts of restorative justice, which appealed deeply to my sense of being in the world. And then uh, I had the incredible good fortune to have the first job in the country at a state level to promote restorative justice. And that was with the Department of Corrections in Minnesota. And that was in 1994. At that time, nobody had heard of restorative justice. And I didn't know about circles at that point. I learned about circles about a year later, sometime in 95. And circles spoke deeply to me because my interest was in community. I had no particular interest in crime, but I was very interested in community and discovered that circle was a process that you could use to harness the energy around harm or crime. You could harness that energy and turn it into positive community building energy. And so it was first introduced to circles as a process that you would use to determine sentences for people who had been found guilty of a particular crime. That work grew and evolved over the years. And I'm known only because I had the good fortune to be sort of on the front end of learning about these processes, but I learned from others. Everything that I share is a product of um, ideas planted in me over a lifetime. And it's not about expertise. One of the core concepts of Circle is that we have a tremendous amount of wisdom from our lived experience. It's why we push back on the term experts. There is a place for experts, uh, absolutely a place for experts. The problem I think that we have in our society is that we have abandoned other forms of knowing in the process of relying on experts. We need both. We need people who have very specialized knowledge because of the amount of time and effort they've put into mastering certain kinds of information and the amount of time that they've spent just thinking about it. We need experts, but we also need other ways of knowing because expertise is largely defined in our culture as a sort of cognitive, linear, rational kind of knowing. But we have body ways of knowing, we have emotional ways of knowing. There are lots of different kinds of wisdoms that are in us. And there's a lot of wisdom from our own lived experience. The problem is that most of the time, we don't slow down enough to be able to reflect and draw on the wisdom of our own lived experience. And it needs to be in an interactive process with others, right? If we're just in our own bubble, it is actually hard for us to understand our own lived experience. When we sit in a space where we share something about our experience and what it looked like and felt like to us, and then we listen to other people share similar experiences, it will have an impact on our interpretation of our own experience as we listen to others. And our experience will have an impact on the others as they interpret their own experience. So this process of human beings sharing lived experiences and describing um, describing how they understand those experiences in their own life to others creates a mixture out of which emerges something that sometimes transcends any individual wisdom or experience, the collective wisdom. And that's always greater than any expert, right? Collective wisdom is inherently greater than any individual in a good process, right? And have a good process that allows people to feel relatively safe so that they can share their experience in a deeply authentic way, which also means being vulnerable, right? To be deeply authentic is a vulnerable experience in our culture. That when we get that kind of sharing, the collective wisdom is always greater than any individual. It's just inherent that would be the case. So Circle accesses this kind of collective wisdom, which can have inputs from experts. Experts can bring useful information, but what's critical is that no one perspective is enough. When we think about the kind of issues that we face in human relationships. So I want to share an idea that, or a way of articulating that I heard recently that I find really helpful because the idea is something that I've been thinking about and lots of other people have been thinking about all along. But I heard a speaker who referenced this framework of distinguishing between complicated problems and complex problems. Right? Complicated problems are problems for which there is they're very difficult, very, very difficult, very complicated, but there is a linear process to come to a solution. So it would be something like putting a man on the moon, right? Very complicated problem, but there is a solution. That complex problems um, are problems for which there is not a like single specific solution, and maybe not exactly a solution at all. It's a continual iterative process of trying to get closer to something that feels better for people. And human relationships largely fall into the complex problem arena, that they do not lend themselves just to linear cognitive processes to figure out what to do next. Um, and and so in complex problems, experts are not, they don't they don't quite fit in the same way that experts do. I'm glad that experts designed the plane that I get on, and that pilots are experts at flying the plane that I get on. Um, but experts doesn't work so well in the field of talking about human relationships and healing, right? And healing is about repair to healing, to human relationships when there's been some kind of harm. Um, and again, it's not that experts don't have a role, right? Individual therapists are an important resource. And I would suggest that it's never enough, because human beings also need healing in community. And the sense that their own lived experience is a source of wisdom, and that happens more readily in a group of peers. To feel that your own lived experience is a source of wisdom and a gift to others requires that you be with a group of peers, not just in a one-on-one relationship with an expert. The other problem with the idea of expertise in the realm of human relationships is it underestimates our innate human capacity to care for one another in the right structure, especially in a collective. It can be too much for one individual to hold the trauma of one other person in a one-on-one interaction. But a group of people can hold the trauma of one individual and hold that collectively in a way that it doesn't overwhelm or overburden any one person. And that presence is the gift that we have to offer each other. Presence and accompaniment, not solutions. That we can't heal for one another. We can't fix one another's lives, but we can be present and we can accompany. And everyone has this capacity at some level. Some people are richer in that capacity than others. That's why bringing together a collective is so helpful, because then you always get some mix of this capacity for listening deeply, for empathy, for holding the pain of another without taking it on as your own pain. Human beings have an enormous capacity to accompany one another through trauma. And we have not been tapping into that as much as we could in the way that we organize and design our communities. So I'll pause there for a moment to see what you have to say.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the chance to just hear you free associate on circles and expertise and the perspective that you bring to bear on it. Um, yeah, I listening listening to you, I was reflecting on my own, what I can't tell you what a pervasive effect being a circle keeper has had on my relations with other people outside the circle. This is just tangential, but it's almost like a mode of interacting with my fellow human creatures these days that I will frame things in terms of like what came up for me while you're saying all that, because that's a way that we respond frequently in circle. I hear Kay shares her experience, her response to the concept of experts in healing. I'm listening to you talk. I am not you. I have a different life has led me to this Zoom meeting. So other things come up for me, but I hear you say those things and I feel myself bristle and I think, well, she's already using a lot of jargony language that is giving me hives. Well, I'm not Kay. I do not live in your, I don't live in your world. I'm a humanistic guy. And so I reflect like, okay, what I would say in this moment, if someone were asking me about experts and evidence, is why are you here? Because let me tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I'm a child sex abuse survivor, and as an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. I want to live. I want to live my life. That is why I'm here talking to UK. That's why I'm at the circle that we're week 11 of the circle season right now. I want to live. I'm interested in things that help me live my life. And I've had numerous, I mean, I have yet to go to a circle that hasn't been life altering. I mean, some are kind of like more dramatically transformative than others. But the question that we answer, what's the edge of your healing when it's our turn to share in the circle, has radically different answers now than it did the first time I answered that question, which I had no answer. It was an amorphous blob of shit. I vomited out. I had no idea. I was drowning in a sea of suffering. There was no edge. It's everywhere. It's like the sea is foamy. There's no difference between the water, the air, just living in a world of coping skills. Everything on the list, in the path from harm to healing that we talk about in Hidden Water, just living in a sea of that. And now I can tell you, a couple of years later, and six or, if so circles, the edge of my healing is how I relate with other people, how I relate with my fellow circle keepers, how I feel betrayed by them, how I fall in love with people, like actual visceral fall in love with people in the little Brady Box bunches. And I witness the chaotic nature of my attachment mechanism. That's the edge of my healing. And I want to bail out of the circle as the circle keeper, and I do my best to mask all these things because that's how I've been living my life. It's not my place to bust in the middle of the circle and rant and rave about it. Anyway, that's a long diatribe, but I say that's a human experience of connection that I've had with other people. I'm happy if people want to get a PhD on it or find some element, some way to reduce that to a hypothesis and a question. That's great. Maybe they can figure out how to optimize it. Maybe if there's 14 weeks instead of 12 weeks, people would be 97% happier at the end. Maybe. I mean, those are the things that got now I've radically, not shared the time, but I'll hand the microphone back to you and say that's what came up for me when I was listening to you talk about experts in healing. I should have set myself a timer because I've not been courteous with the time.
Oh, yeah, definitely not a time problem with what you just reflected on. But I'm interested in, like, uh, what did you hear that bristled?
Oh, me bristling has nothing to do with anything in the universe except me bristling. That's my relation. I mean, I practice Zen
but
and my
but
relationship, and I have a chaotic attachment mechanism. My relationship with that is, oh, someone's driving me bananas and I'm bristling about it. This has nothing to do with you or anything else. That has to do with
but
my difficulty living in the world.
it is interesting to um, for me to look at things that cause bristling in others,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't anticipate that, and then it's like, oh, okay, um, what's the
No,
perspective I'm missing?
no, you're not. There's no perspective. What you're missing is I'm a curmudgeonly like guy with the amateur interest in philosophy I've been reading for a long time. So I hear you, the phrase you use the phrase and ways of knowing. That's what it was. And I thought,
Okay.
I know exactly what you're getting at. I'm on board. There's nothing, no beef with that. But I thought, see, even that is some kind of jargon from epistemology. That's some kind of jargon from maybe even literary criticism. That's some kind of jargon from some type of cutting edge of some type of social studies field, ways of knowing. And I know exactly what they're getting at. I mean, there's I get it. I do not need any, and I'm sympathetic to but I say, see, even there, this sciency, academicized language has even seized Kay's brain. She's talking to me about ways of knowing. She's been seized by the Borg. It's human life right here and now. But that's because I spend my time reading stuff about Zen and sitting on cushions, and I'm kind of sensitized, like, here's a bunch of ideas about reality. Let me get back to the reality of being a man, 51-year-old with BPD, NPD, trying not to eat too many Oreos and get through the day and be happy. So I
Yeah.
stay
Okay.
focused on
So
anchored.
that's interesting because indeed, my bachelor's degree is in math, right? So there's a very strong linear part to my brain, but I think that got balanced when I stayed home for 16 years raising my children.
Yeah,
So that I think that one of my roles in this work has been to be a translator or a bridge between um, this being human and relating in what to me is a worldview that I learned through exposure to indigenous people. But I think it's present in Buddhism and in other traditions. Uh, Being able to connect people to that worldview, which is nonlinear, in a linear way, because we're
yeah,
all highly, highly trained in a linear way in life as a
yeah,
whole, even though our genetic impulses transcend that regularly, but our socialization is very much structured in a linear understanding of the universe, of time, of space, of everything, and that so a part of my gift, I think, to this work has been to be able to uh, translate these concepts that are deep in circle for me is a mean to an end. It's not an end. It is a way for us to practice how to be in good relationship with each other. Um, I love the term convivencia from both Portuguese and Spanish, the idea of living well together. And for me, that's what Circle's about. It's helping us develop the muscles for living well together. And you describe that in saying that it's the way you relate to people outside of Circle. So the point of Circle is not to get good at Circle, it's to strengthen the
right.
muscles so that we can operate from that best part of ourselves, uh, which Circle tends to nurture in spaces where we don't have the structure of Circle. So this is a very different way of relating to, and I think that Circle's grounded in some very different assumptions about human nature and the nature of the universe than our modern Western culture, and that I've been able somehow to bridge between those two things in language that people can understand, which includes scientific language. And what I love about it is that in many ways, modern science, modern physics, modern biology, and the neurosciences are validating what we already knew, right? But that we began to doubt about ourselves as human beings. But then, in fact, these are not new understandings. They're understandings that are deeply in most spiritual traditions, in the, the philosophy. I actually am not familiar with that field, but uh, yeah, and I think that I need a logic for what I do. At the same time, that I am open to the reality that I can't logically explain what happens sometimes in circles.
Can I share two things that came to my mind while you're talking? Because they're on different strands. I'll start with the more abstract one because I'd rather get back to human beings and Zoom screens and circles. The phrase you said, what we already knew, the neuroscience and all this. To to put it very briefly, my kind of beef as a person who practices Zen, but I studied ancient Greek language and philosophy in college and been reading that stuff for a long time as an amateur. I'm not a have no advanced degree in that stuff. I'm not an expert, just a human being. Um, my beef with philosophy, basically modern philosophy, 400-ish years ago, there was a kind of a split. Science, the quest for modern science, we're going to conquer nature. Many people have heard the phrase, I think, therefore I am. There's kind of a split, the mind body problem. There's a spiritual world and a material, in a yin and yang kind of sense, all of that kind of split goes back about 400-ish years. And I just think that's a wrong turn. I heard someone say at some point that, like, well, the real wrong turn came with the agrarian revolution. We just, like, okay, maybe they made a convincing case, but we planted the corn. I don't know what to tell you. That was a long time ago. That ship sailed. So we've done that 400 years. But what we already knew before we split and decide, like, why are we here? It's about human beings. It's about you and me and the Brady Bunch people in the circle meetings. It's about that. It's about human life and how we live. Science is there to, you know what I mean? Like, this bifurcation where the actual human life of actual human beings is something that barely counts off to the side because we need to go back and focus on some abstractions that sound more sciency is a problem. That's my problem with the expertise, and I'll let me pause there and then before he sees more time and then I'll segue to the second point. But do you have any response to any of that? Not that you have to, but I'm just curious.
Oh, well, that makes sense to me. It completely makes sense. That that we separated these parts of ourselves that philosophy. I mean, and I'm not well read. You need to know I am not well
Me
read.
neither.
One of my most um, one of my most important mentors, Barry Stewart, once said, how can someone be so wise and be so illiterate to me? Because I've not I've not read the most basic texts in mediation, for example, or in conflict resolution, or in all these things that relate to what I'm doing, because I didn't come in an academic path. I came in this very accidental path. Um, so so I have both this, mental structure that really resonated to math and to logic. It was, what I focused on in college. And the more abstract, the better. I loved abstract algebra. I mean, I'm not talking about statistics, nothing like that. It was the real theoretical stuff. And there seems to be this part of me that really can feel other human beings. Um, and but I one of the things that has really um, supported my work for me is my ability for pattern recognition. So spending so much time in circle, I could pull out the patterns that I came to understand to be human nature. This is because this happens in every circle, right? And there's a particular exercise that I do in training. Yeah.
No, I got to just break in and say, do you know how much trouble we would both be in an academic community for saying human nature and both knowing what we're talking about and both know, I know exactly what you mean. And I know the phenomenon of thinking that now you see people on the street that have green circle on a neon sign around their neck and all these patterns.
Yeah.
That's real humanity.
Yes.
Couldn't get in the door. Couldn't get in the door with it.
No, no, not at
In the
all.
academic world. Couldn't get in the door with actual profound human wisdom. And anyone ever watching this, if you want to witness profound human wisdom, find yourself in a circumstance you end up begging to get on some circle for something and you'll see someone who might look a little bit like Kay of her generation. You might experience some profound human wisdom in there, who from people who can't get in the door
Yeah,
on academic
yeah.
credentials, in terms of now, I mean, I just seized the microphone and grabbed it from you. Let me give it back to you. But I just thought about that human nature, right? It's human nature, and you can't
Oh,
even say
see,
the
and
phrase.
I think for me, understanding human nature is at the core of what the circle structure, how the circle is designed.
Yeah,
And this is a very ancient process that
yeah,
people understood this a long, long time ago, that human nature has capacity for both great harm and great good. And how do you try to nurture the capacity for great good relative to the level of
yeah.
harm? And that the structure circle is designed, I believe, designed to do exactly that. And this process has been around, longer than we know. And that now we have to figure out, okay, so how do you apply that in a modern, multicultural, complex context?
All the time.
Yes, all the time, but you have to be intentional, right? It doesn't, in ancient communities, this was more built into the structure of their daily lives in daily interaction, not just when you were sitting in circle. um, Now we have to be far more intentional about, and we've been taught that we're something different than who we are as human creatures. So it's about for me relearning who we are, and having confidence, for instance, around the question of healing, having confidence that we all have capacity to support each other through the most difficult moments, and that this is going to become critical in the future. Some of the most interesting work I've been involved in the last couple of years was work in Brazil, where they use circle to some degree. Still very much on the edges, we know, but to some degree, they use circle to respond to the trauma of catastrophic flooding, using it in the acute phase of the flooding. And this is pretty severe trauma. This was worse than Katrina was in the U.S. in terms of the scope of the damage. And there was, of course, initially this fear about, well, but we're not therapists. But the thing is, there will never be enough therapists for the level of trauma that we're already sitting with, much less what's coming at us in the future. And we do have this capacity to hold one another through enormous harms that we cannot control. We can't stop it, but it matters to come together. It makes a difference for us to come and care about one another, even when we can't do anything to stop the harm, whether that's man-made or, immediately man-made like violence, or whether that's, um, some natural disasters are not man-made. That regardless of what the source of it is, when we're experiencing acute trauma, it matters to sit with other human beings and know that you're not alone, know that you're cared about, and know that your presence supports someone else, because everybody's going through the same thing. And my presence supports you, and your presence supports me. So I am no longer helpless. There is something I am doing that gives to someone else. And that when we're not helpless, we're not hopeless. So I think, yeah, it is so important that we recognize we have an innate human capacity to support each other in healing spaces, even under the most difficult of circumstances.
I think, thank you for that. Thank you for that. It Something came into my mind from a circle I was recently in where I mean, something I love about Hidden Water and my fellow green circlers is I think, as you say, you see, so everyone could benefit from all the stuff that you're talking about, all this, living your own life as it is. But why would anyone bother going through all the ruckus without a reason? And my fellow Green Circle people have reasons. We have reasons. We have motivation. We have lives that don't work. We have all the effects of being an adult child sex abuse survivor. For those of us that aren't in jails, institutions, or death and are able to sign up for Healing Circle and show up and, execute at that level, which many, many, many people cannot. And there are fellow Green Circlers too, even if they can never, sorry, even if they don't execute at the level where they can come to a circle, they're still there. We have the motivation to say, like, how do I do this? And the alienation. I think one thing that we definitely all share is a sense of alienation where things happen and the real things that really actually really happen and affect you in your life are not real because they don't exist for anyone else and no one talks about them and the world pretend that's the real stuff. The fake, the personas, the stated beliefs, the wardrobe, the costumes, the societal teachings, the superego, all that stuff which is presented to us as real we know is fake because we know that other stuff is real, but the real stuff is fake and the fake stuff is real, which reminds me of Penn and Teller, the magician. He said that he met a PhD student who was writing a PhD thesis on magic, and they started talking. And the student said, "No, I'm not doing it on the kind of magic that you, Penn and Teller, do. That's fake magic. I'm doing it on real magic." And Teller said, so the real magic that really happens with boxes and lids and mirrors, that's fake. The magic that really happens is fake. And the fake magic with cobras and people that disappear that never actually happens and has spells and a grimoire, that's the real magic. Okay. That's the life of a child sex abuse survivor in a nutshell for many of us. I mean, I think there's something about that. So go ahead, tell me all you know, tell me more about all this stuff that you're saying I need to believe, please. Is my kind of response to that. I mean, let me give you the microphone back because I feel like I just took over again. But I'm very curious in your pattern recognition. Let me give you a prompt if you want one. I'm very curious in your own pattern recognition and like how's it changed for you? You probably I don't know if you have a clue how many circles you've been in, but what's your experience of humanity? How's it altered? How is it different now in any ways that you can think of than it was, 1,000 circles ago or something?
So mostly I train. Um, I facilitate directly frequently enough to stay real. But mostly I train, which is done in circle. And one of the exercises that I do is an exercise that we do with a bunch of sticks without talking. And that exercise has been one of my biggest teachers about circle because it's been my big teacher about human nature. And I would have to say, so I also want to share with you something I learned from an Indigenous elder in Canada. He says, a teaching is the rekindling of a truth you were born with.
I
A
like that.
teaching is the rekindling of a truth you were born with. And that's always been my understanding of my own work. That's why I could never think of myself as an expert, is that if something I say resonates with you, it's because you already knew it. You may not have known that you knew it, but you knew it. And so very early on, somebody observed back to me that what I was doing was helping people get in touch with what they already know. That was even before I got the teaching from this elder in Canada. So I have this exercise, and over time, watching it, probably done it 500 times, I figure now, and watching it for the first 100 200 times, I began noticing and pulling out what are the patterns of human behavior that for me are related directly to circle and how it's structured. So the most important of those for me was the idea that in a process where everyone has voice, the group will not allow any one person to take over. We don't have time for me to tell you all the stories that led me to that. But this is a very powerful idea that in a process where everyone has voice, the group will not allow any one person to take over. It's not about the facilitator controlling it so that no one takes over. It is about the group. We have very few spaces in our culture where that's real. That's what circle's attempting to create. We don't create that perfectly, but that's what we're attempting to create. That for me is the most important one. And it is so deeply about the potential for, and it embedded in that are a couple of things about human nature. One is that sometimes we will resist even what we want if we feel we didn't have voice.
Mm.
So the process, the pattern that I saw was where one person is trying to make the exercise end because they're just sick and tired of it and it's not clear what the point is, which is all deliberate. uh, they'll try to make it end. And even other people who clearly were kind of done and ready to be done will sometimes push back if the attempt is a unilateral attempt at control. And because everybody has a voice, nobody can by themselves end it. It only ends when everybody agrees. So, uh, yeah, so this idea that we actually, that humans resist sometimes even what they want if they feel like they didn't have voice. And we run all these coercive systems, right? Where we actually create our own resistance to what we're trying to achieve. Some good thing, oh, always for some good, but
Because
coercive.
because
Well,
an
no,
expert,
a lot of it is for good intentions, right? A lot of it's for good intentions, but not understanding that process matters, or not understanding sufficiently the process matters. So another pattern I saw was that um, we are very highly socialized in this culture, that we have to build on what comes to us. And so in this exercise, people will judge one another because somebody took all the sticks apart from something somebody else made and reorganized it in a different way, which is well within the instructions. um, but people will often express frustration that others, you know, undid what somebody else had done. And then I invite them to reflect on the how deeply embedded that idea is that you're being difficult if you don't build on what others have already done. But Circle is inviting everybody to speak their truth. So what if my truth doesn't build on what came to me, and that you want to get everybody's truth before you try to find common ground, right? And so we are so highly socialized that we're supposed to look for common ground immediately, and that suppresses our own truth. Another pattern I saw in this activity is that often the first few rounds, so we're going around with each person having a turn and just continuing until it finishes. Um, that in the early rounds, people are very tentative. It takes time before people can actually sort of express themselves more freely. And so that you only see the more innovative and creative things, or not only, but often you see the more innovative and creative things after there's a little frustration in the group. And so that, you know, human impatience and frustration actually can help you break through to something that's a new view and an innovative use of the material that you're working with. And the other really big one, that is that humans are incredibly meaning-making creatures. It's mind-boggling. We had this exercise with a bunch of sticks, and the different narratives that are going on in different heads is phenomenal. The meaning that people are imputing. So for some people, it's a bunch of wood and they think about a campfire. And for some people, it's just annoying. And for some people, each piece of wood is a member of the community and you have to treat each one with dignity and you have to include them all and you can't leave anybody out and they all need to be connected. And for somebody else, the little pieces of debris that you end up with, piece of bark that fall off or sand that was in some of this driftwood, that becomes what you have to protect. For some people, it's detritus. We have to get rid of this. For some people, it's those are the little ones, the helpless ones. Humans are incredibly, it's just a bunch of sticks, but we will have so many narratives going on about what this is, and that this meaning making, which we do uniquely, is both the joy and the curse of being human, because it makes life so interesting that we make meaning uniquely, and it introduces a lot of misunderstanding and conflict. So
Yeah.
those are the sort of, yeah, pattern, the way that patterns um, became the, the way that I could understand watching these patterns of human behavior with this very simple exercise over with groups of people that are all across the spectrum, socioeconomically, racially, culturally, age, and those patterns were absolutely consistent. Didn't matter what your
Yeah.
human variables were. Fascinating to me, just absolutely fascinating. Though I have sat through the exercise 500 times, I still get
Yeah.
something out of it every time.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I would love to do that exercise 1,000 times for myself. All these things, I feel myself going bananas as you're talking about the exercise and think this will be great. I would learn a lot about myself doing this, facilitating this exercise for other people 1,000 times. It would be great. And people, pardon me, um, whenever I can't shut up about it, people sometimes ask like questions about Zen or some kind. And I used to like mistakenly kind of just straight up answer them with like common attitudes and things. And I've learned better because Zen is a practice. It's like something you do. Anything you think comes on later on down the line. It's something you do. It's a way, kind of like a way of life. But what something you said resonated because I thought, if I wanted to encapsulate like Zen as a practice, as a way of life, I would say more than anything else, it's about meaning making and the full awareness that I'm a meaning making monkey fully at all levels, at all times. There's no off switch for it. And I can save you many thousands of pages and say you can read up on Western philosophy, and Heidegger will eventually tell you the same thing, that no matter what you say or do, mankind has to live in a horizon of some kind. You cannot cope directly with the chaos of the cosmos just as it is. Even if you're Chinese and a Buddhist or a Taoist, you have the Tao. You say, I can't understand it, but there's the Tao. It does what it does, and we can't comprehend it, but that's a way of understanding it. Uh, but the Zen more than anything else, it's like, okay, so if I fully absorb that I'm a meaning making monkey, what's my stance toward all the meanings I make? All of them. They're all just meanings. It's just a piece of stick. It's just a piece of stick. Is it my life raft because I'm drowning on the Titanic and Kate Winslet is floating by and now I can live too? Did it fall in the plane engine and wreck it? Now we're all going to die? I don't know. It's just a pile of sticks. Discriminatory thinking is a phrase they use in Zen, good and bad. Like and don't like is the easiest thing in the world. You're never wrong about like and don't like. Good and bad, very treacherous ground. Good and bad, very treacherous. Or childhood sex abuse survivor, right here saying it's very hard to tell the good from the bad because I'm right here talking to you right now and living a life that's pretty incredible. And I don't know that if I change one of those single pieces of sticks or dirt in my life that I would be here. All I know is that's not here anyway, the past. It's not here. So Zen, I mean, I'm going to hand you back the microphone, but that came to my mind. Like it's about what's my relationship with the meaning that I make. And I devalue all the meanings I make before they come off the end of the conveyor belt. Their value is very low. Well, I'm still a human being. I'm still me. I'm still living a life. It's just way less fraught by about 1,000,000%. Let
Yeah, and maybe that's a meaning too.
That's a meaning too. That's all. There's no
It's,
escape. If you
I
go
can't
straight to the
escape.
source and you read Dogen and Zen, he will tell you straight up. People read books about Zen. They go to the primary source. Go to the math. He will tell you over and over again, there's no escape. Sit on your cushion, look at the wall, have your thoughts, don't interfere, have you exist naturally as a human being. Do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is some there are some universals actually. uh, and that one of those is that we are these incredibly meaning making creatures. What circle helps us to do, I think, is to slow down enough to observe our own meaning making and then make choices about whether that meaning making is useful to us or helpful to us for whatever we decide our purpose might be. Um, but to be able to be more conscious in the meaning making choices that, which, because a lot of meaning making is happening unconsciously, I think. And and then we're acting out in ways that we don't know ourselves where that's coming from. So in circle, a big part of, because I'm a trainer, training other people to facilitate circle, big focus on self-awareness. That if you can, and that's what's happening in circle, is because we slow down, because when you don't have the talking piece, you can't respond immediately. Less of your brain is tied up thinking about what you would say. And that part of your brain starts to notice the internal dialogue. And once you start noticing the internal dialogue, you understand more about your own meaning making. You begin to have choice about where you will put your sense of meaning, and that I think humans have a natural inclination toward a more positive meaning making if they're in a supportive space to do that.
I think of it as a practice for exactly circles as a practice for exactly that reason. You have to sit there until it is your turn, and then you can tell them how stupid they are, except you also can't crosstalk. So, this is me. This is like this guy talking, I observe all that. I would have abstractly agreed with the fact that I'm a human creature, same as a fisherman from Myanmar. Before I went to my first circle, I would have agreed to that. Yes, sure. Absolutely. We're all human beings. I have a overwhelmingly visceral sense of the identity of all human beings now. Like just sitting here talking to you, Kay, I have a strongly visceral sense. Even like down to male and female, the cosmetic subtle differences of the shape of the outside of my body and the age and all that. I just have yet to hear anything I have not been able directly to relate to, you know,
Yeah.
at all.
I've never sat in circle with anyone where I couldn't feel their humanity.
Yeah.
That includes people in prison and people. I mean, it doesn't go to the the very highest levels of power in our culture. I don't sit in any circles with those folks. But other than that, across all kinds of differences and people from all kinds of circumstances, never sat in a circle with anyone I couldn't connect to their humanity.
Yeah. My working life has been really weird, and it's been like maybe 20 years around in and around like highly conflict world, like organized labor on both sides of it, those campaigns, and the progressive world changing world for a long time on a professional level. I thought a lot about different flavors of organizing and changing the world and models of change and all that. And I have a lot of hostility toward all of it. But and as well as everything else. I mean, me being hostile is neither here nor there. But Bayard Rustin is a figure that really stands the test of time. And if you've never looked into him very much, and for this day and age, for right now in our moment, Bayard Rustin is the guy for the time. He was not a guy that you would hear because he was a strategist. He was a friend of MLK Jr. He was a strategist, and I think the Rosa Parks, that was part of a community organizing project. And I think that nothing just happens. Um, I say advisedly. The Rosa Parks project, I think, was Bayard Rustin's idea, like leading up to that. And he had a strategy. He went to India for a while. He had a strategy. He insisted that anyone associated with him give everyone they dealt with exactly the level of respect and dignity that they demanded from them. Step one is what's under your control. I can control very little. What I say with the hole in the front of my skull, what I do with these, where I go with my feet. Step one in the Bayard Rustin plan is we are going to insist on giving everyone around us the respect and dignity that we insist on getting from them. And that was step one because that's under your control. And if you want to change the world around you, I mean, if you want to change people, change how you relate to them. They don't have any choice but to change. But anyway, I want to be conscious of your time. We're almost to an hour now, and I'll give you a chance if you have anything to say about Bayard Rustin and my tangential remarks. Then my closing question is, what's the edge of your healing? So I'll hand you the microphone, and you can take it from there.
Um, I think I have seen some stuff about Bayard Rustin, and I just saw a YouTube video sent by my grandson about a guy who was running for senator in Texas, and I think he's practicing exactly that. Right? He's running. He's a Democrat running as a Christian, and there's an exchange with Joe Rogan that is fascinating, and is like something that I sometimes talk about in training. Is that um, the Aikido? I once went to a workshop about the Aikido as a model for conflict resolution. So that when a blow is coming towards you, you don't push back on that blow. You pivot to be parallel to it, and then you have the chance of influencing it. But to do that, you must, for a moment, see what the other person sees,
Yeah.
right? To pivot, then you're in alignment with that person. You can see what they're looking at, to see. And I've always taught this as this is the way you approach resistance, whether you're promoting restorative justice broadly or whether you're talking about circle. Because people will always ask, how do I convince? I say, you don't. You don't convince anyone of anything. People
No.
resist being convinced. That's human nature, right? This is the pattern of human nature. They will resist being convinced. But if you will look for a moment through their eyes, you don't have to agree, you don't have to adopt that as your stance. But if you understand what that is, you'll find something you can agree to. And
Yeah.
then you have the opportunity to take that point of agreement to a different conclusion than the one that they take it to. Um, so yes, I think that is the strategy for this particular moment in time. And I think I have heard about Bayard. That question of what's the edge of my healing journey, I can't answer that. I think that's a really difficult question. I am any question like that, I have to sit with for
Yeah.
days.
Not a
uh,
pop quiz. Not a
yeah,
pop quiz.
but um, but I think that one of the things that Circle has brought me is much more ability to notice my own reactions to things and then interrogate those gently. Not judging, trying not to judge myself, but be able to. And I'm better at that than I used to be. But it's yeah. So it's the ongoing journey of uh, noticing noticing what causes discomfort for me, what causes hurt for me, and then inviting myself to look at what's behind that, as opposed to attaching responsibility to someone else for that.
Yeah.
And Hidden Water has been just a wonderful part of my work. I think that um, it's a marvelous model in a number of ways. One of those that I talk about quite a bit is the support for keepers. That's really important. But this fundamental idea that you don't have to be an expert to support each other's healing, that Hidden Water has been able to demonstrate that at a level that becomes undeniable. Right? That is the evidence. The evidence is the 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 number of people who have benefited from participating in the hidden water circles. It's also a marvelous example of emergent process, right? The way it looks now is not exactly what we pictured at the very beginning. Um, we didn't, we were in the origins of hidden water. The goal was family circles. No, I would no longer call that the goal. And that the individual healing circles were a way to prepare people to be able to sit together in a family system. And these individual healing circles essentially became an end in themselves. That this could make enormous changes in people's lives, whether or not anybody else in their family was willing to walk that same path with them. Um, and so along the way, various things have changed from what we would have mapped out originally, and it's always from the learning of the you take step one and you learn so much from step one that your original thought about step two is no longer relevant. And then but step two emerges out of step one, then you take step two, and then it leads you to step three.
Yeah.
And I think that's really an important model for change, because too often we try to map out how we get from here to the end goal in this very linear way. And it turns out life doesn't work like that.
No, I think you put your finger on it really perfectly. And the anecdote you told a few minutes ago about I don't remember what the qualification was, but there was some expert who had a hot tip for making some process better, except implementing that hot tip would have destroyed the process, despite his good intentions. You told us some story roughly with a plot like that. And I thought that's exactly, you have to have a view of the whole, like the whole human being here, the whole project that we're doing is one of the drawbacks of a fixation with expertise. We got this
Yes.
little slice and we're going to burn down the whole to implement our little slice. You know, what's the whole project that we're doing here? It's about
Yep.
human life.
It's about humans. Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
same here. And is there any last words you want to get off your chest? Anything on your mind?
No, and we've touched on a lot of the things yeah, fire up my energies.
Well, thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time, Kay, and thank you so much. Vaya con Dios, and live long and prosper. We'll talk to you
You
later.
too.
Thank you so much,
Take care.
Kay. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.